The Grand Hall shimmered with gold and marble, a monument to a 1,000-year Reich. Hermann Göring, second only to Hitler, held court. His uniform strained at the buttons, a cascade of medals across his chest. He held a newspaper clipping, and as he read it, a low chuckle rumbled from deep within him. It grew, infectious, until the room echoed with the laughter of generals and party officials. The source of their amusement? A speech from across the ocean. American President Franklin Roosevelt, promising his nation would produce 50,000 airplanes a year. 50,000! Göring threw his head back and roared. The Americans are good at making automobiles and refrigerators, he scoffed. But they are not a nation of warriors. They cannot build planes. They can only make razor blades. The clinking of champagne glasses underscored his certainty, a sound starkly different from the rhythmic thud and clang of Krupp, steelworks and Messerschmitt assembly lines that worked day and night, forging an empire, cut across the Atlantic. America 1940, a nation restless, uneasy, but mostly a nation at peace. FDR's number 50,000 planes landed not with a bang, but with a collective gasp of disbelief. It sounded like a fantasy, a madman's dream. In the halls of Congress, isolationist senators decried it as warmongering, a deliberate step toward a conflict that was not America's to fight. On the streets, people listened on their radios and shook their heads. 50,000? We'd only built 3,000 military aircraft the entire previous year. The skepticism was thickest in the boardrooms of Detroit. Men who had mastered the art of putting a nation on wheels looked at the blueprints for a B-24 Liberator bomber with its million-plus parts and miles of wiring and saw an alien creature. Henry Ford himself had initially declared, "We can't do it." The head of General Motors, William Knudsen, was more blunt. "It's a pipe dream." The central question hung heavy in the air, a fog of doubt rolling in from the coastlines. Was the United States, a nation of shopkeepers and farmers, truly capable of becoming the arsenal of democracy? Could it mass-produce weapons on a scale the world had never witnessed, and do it in time? But beneath the doubt, something was stirring. A different kind of engine was turning over. In Washington, the newly formed War Production Board was a hive of frantic energy. Blueprints were unrolled under harsh lamplight in midnight meetings. Telegrams flew, ordering machine tools that didn't exist yet from factories that were still being built. The nation's industrial blood began to circulate. Train cars laden with red bauxite ore rumbled from Arkansas's mines toward aluminum smelters in the Pacific Northwest, powered by the immense electricity of the new Grand Coulee Dam. The quiet hum of peacetime was being replaced by a rising crescendo of industrial mobilization. Names that once meant family cars and farm equipment were now whispered with military urgency. Ford's audacious plan for the Willow Run bomber plant factory, a mile long where B-24s would roll off the assembly line like Model TS. Boeing's Plant 2 in Seattle, already expanding, its workers learning the intricate dance of assembling the B-17 Flying Fortress. North American Aviation, where designers were sketching a fighter plane with a revolutionary wing, a plane that would become the legendary P-51 Mustang. And on Long Island, Grumman, the Iron Works, known for building tough, reliable naval aircraft that could take a beating and bring their pilots home. The transformation was visceral, immediate. The government ordered a complete stop to all civilian automobile production. On factory floors from coast to coast, the familiar assembly lines that produced Buicks and Chevrolets were literally ripped from the concrete. New, heavier machinery was bolted down in their place. A social revolution unfolded in lockstep with the industrial one. With 16 million men headed for military service, the factory gates opened to new faces. Women, once relegated to the home or women's work, picked up rivet guns and welding torches. Rosie the Riveter becoming a national icon. African-American families left the rural South in a great migration, seeking jobs. The year is 1942. America is a nation in motion, a vast machine grinding itself into fighting shape. The great conversion isn't happening in boardrooms or on blueprints anymore. It's happening on the factory floor, in the hands of millions. In a Detroit tool and die shop, a veteran machinist, his hands stained with a lifetime of cutting oil, patiently guides the calloused fingers of a farm kid from Iowa. He's teaching him to read a micrometer, to feel the difference between 1/10,000th of an inch and two. This isn't just a lesson. It's the passing of a sacred knowledge, the language of precision that will build the engines of war. A few aisles over, A woman who just a month ago was running a household is now learning to buck rivets. Her instructor tells her to close her eyes. You don't see a good rivet, he says. You feel it. She listens, feeling the solid thud of the bucking bar against the rivet shank, learning a new rhythm that will hold the skin of a bomber together at 30,000 feet. In a newly integrated shipyard in Virginia, a black welder, who had to fight just to get through the gates, steps up to a bulkhead. The foreman, the other workers, they all watch, a mix of skepticism and hostility in their eyes. He lowers his mask, strikes an arc, and lays down a perfect, unbroken seam. The brilliant bead he leaves behind isn't just a weld. It's a silent, undeniable statement of skill. This transformation is orchestrated from Washington. The War Production Board becomes the nation's quartermaster, making ruthless decisions. No more new cars, no more refrigerators. Rubber is for tires on jeeps and landing gear, not for garden hoses. Aluminum is for fighters, not pots and pans. Suddenly, your old toothpaste tube becomes a strategic material. The great automobile assembly lines, masters of mass production, are torn apart and reborn. Where sedans once rolled, the skeletons of B-24 Liberators now take shape. The entire country goes back to school. Night classes spring up in high school gymnasiums and community halls, turning clerks, barbers, and librarians into apprentice machinists and draftsmen. A new science is being born alongside the machines: logistics. It's the art of getting the right thing to the right place at the right time, on a scale humanity has never attempted. Look closely and you can see the arteries of this new system. New rail spurs branch off main lines, disappearing into the gates of massive, windowless factories that didn't exist a year ago. Convoys of flatbed trucks, their loads shrouded in canvas, rumble down freshly paved roads, carrying crated aircraft fuselages and wings. At the docks, Liberty ships, themselves a product of this industrial miracle, are loaded with a giant's erector set, engines, propellers, and tail assemblies stacked high, destined for assembly depots overseas. Across the Atlantic, in the damp green of the English countryside, the first squadrons of the 8th Air Force are arriving. They are a thin presence, their crews young and untested, their aircraft few. They are the sharp, fragile point of the spear, and they look back across the ocean, waiting. Back home, the effort is relentless. Inspectors with magnifying glasses and calipers hover over mountains of parts, their approval stamps hitting metal in a constant percussive rhythm. On airfields from Texas to California, the WASP's Women Air Force Service pilots take the controls of newly minted P-47 Thunderbolts and B-17 Flying Fortresses. They are ferry pilots, leapfrogging these powerful, unfamiliar machines from factory to port, each flight a crucial link in the chain. But it's not a seamless victory. The learning curve is brutal. At the enormous Willow Run plant, hailed as a symbol of Ford's production genius, early days are a fiasco of mismanagement, parts shortages, and worker housing crises. Quality control is a constant battle. An engine fails on a test stand because of a misaligned gear. A wing spar is rejected for a hairline crack invisible to the naked eye. Each failure means a delay, and delay is measured in lives. For every chart showing production graphs spiking upward, another report from the front lines shows the war's insatiable appetite. 1943. High above the Third Reich, the sky is scarred. Contrails crisscross the frozen blue, not as ephemeral vapor trails, but as lines drawn in a brutal, geometric war. This is the new front line, 6 miles up, where the air is thin and death is a constant companion. Down below, inside the aluminum skin of a B-17 Flying Fortress named Lucky 7, the world is a cacophony of fear and focus. We're part of the massive Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission, a daring, desperate gamble to cripple Germany's war machine. The intercom crackles to life. Flak 2 o'clock heavy. Outside, black puffs of smoke blossom with terrifying precision, each one a potential killer. Shrapnel rattles against the fuselage like angry hail. The bomber lurches, a giant beast wounded in the sky. Inside, breath fogs up on oxygen masks, the cold so intense it feels like a physical blow. The waist gunner fights to traverse his 50 cal, his movements stiff in the bulky flight suit. From the tail, a voice, young and strained, cuts through the noise. Bandits! 6 o'clock high! 109's coming in fast! The plane shudders as the gunners open up, brass casings clattering onto the floor. The air fills with the smell of cordite and ozone. Another bomber, just off our wing, blossoms into a horrifying orange flower, its pieces tumbling back to earth. 10 men gone in an instant. That evening, back at Thorpe Abbott's, the silence is heavier than the flak. Empty bunks are stark, painful reminders of the day's cost. A half-finished letter sits on a footlocker. A worn photograph lies on a pillow. These ghosts haunt the Nissen huts, a testament to the brutal attrition of daylight bombing. The question hangs in the smoky air of the mess hall, whispered over lukewarm coffee. Is it worth it? Can we sustain this? The strategy of unescorted daylight raids is being paid for in blood, and every crewman knows it. But even as crews grieve, the gears of war grind on, implacable and relentless. Back stateside, in a sprawling factory in Willow Run or Seattle, the answer to that question is being forged in steel and fire. The same afternoon, a crew is lost over Germany. A new B-17, gleaming and powerful, rolls off the assembly line. The sheer industrial might of America is a weapon in itself. Replacement crews, fresh-faced and determined, flow from training pipelines in an ever-widening stream. Spare engines are stacked like cordwood in depots, ready to be shipped out. Lost groups are reconstituted in weeks, their ranks filled, their resolve hardened. For the Luftwaffe, the pressure is immense. A German ace, a veteran of countless dogfights, lands his Messerschmitt, his fuel gauge hovering on empty. He knows his skill is matched against an enemy with seemingly limitless resources. In the workshops, mechanics resort to cannibalizing parts from wrecked aircraft just to keep the others flying. In Berlin, Reichsmarshal Göring fumes and promises, railing that German production will catch up, that new wonder weapons will sweep the Allied bombers from the skies. But his words ring hollow against the relentless tide. A shift is coming. On Allied airfields, Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, rugged and powerful, are being fitted with drop tanks, pushing their range ever deeper into enemy territory. And there are whispers of a new fighter, a thoroughbred. The P-51 Mustang, a good plane made great by the marriage of its airframe to a British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, built under license by Packard. It has the legs, the speed, the promise to follow the bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The relentless momentum builds. The grief for the fallen is channeled into a steely determination. The strategic debate gives way to tactical innovation. In a quiet planning room, far from the roar of engines and the chatter of machine guns, Allied commanders gather around a map of Europe. They look at the intelligence reports, the production numbers, the attrition rates. A finger taps on the calendar, circling a date. They are planning an operation, a series of missions so massive, so audacious, that it aims to do nothing less than break the back of the Luftwaffe once and for all. It will be the ultimate test of the theory that factories can outpace firepower, that industrial might can overcome the courage. The year is 1944, and the war is about to be decided not on a battlefield, but in the skies above the factories that feed it. It begins in the frozen February air with what they call Big Week. Over Germany, bomb bay doors grind open, unleashing a storm of high explosives on aircraft assembly plants in Leipzig, Brunswick, and Gotha. This isn't just a raid. It's an industrial duel fought at 25,000 feet. On one side, the German war machine, desperate to build interceptors. On the other, the United States, a nation that has become the arsenal of democracy in the most literal sense. Back home, across the vast expanse of America, the numbers are staggering, almost unbelievable. In this year alone, nearly 100,000 aircraft will roll off the lines. That's more than one plane every 6 minutes. The narrative of the air war now pounds like a relentless hydraulic press. In Seattle, Inglewood, Bethpage, and on Long Island, assembly lines move with a relentless rhythm, sending fresh squadrons out like inexorable tides. For every bomber lost over Europe, 2 more seem to take its place, and now they have a new guardian. The P-51 Mustang, a thoroughbred fighter with the legs to go all the way to Berlin and back. They sweep ahead of the bomber streams, a silver scythe clearing the skies. German interceptors, the fearsome Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts, still rise to fight. They are flown by brave, often fanatical pilots, but they are rising into a meat grinder. The experienced Luftwaffe aces are being whittled down, and their replacements, rushed through training, are dying faster than Germany can train new ones. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, works miracles of organization, frantically dispersing production into hidden workshops and underground caves. But it's a desperate race against a flood. Hermann Göring, The bombastic head of the Luftwaffe sees his bluster thin into a cold, creeping dread. The promises he made to the Führer are turning to ash in his mouth. Then comes June. On the 6th, the sky over Normandy is not blue but a dense, dark gray ceiling of metal. It's thick with thousands of C-47 transports, towing gliders filled with men and machines. Fighter bombers circle like hawks. Air supremacy is no longer an abstract military term. It is a physical reality, a suffocating blanket that the Wehrmacht on the ground cannot pierce. From below, it's a terrifying spectacle. A German soldier in a bunker looks up and sees the sky blotted out, knowing nothing he can do will stop it. A French farmer in his field simply stares, mouth agape, at the endless parade of Allied roundels, a sight unseen for 4 long years. On the roads leading inland from the beaches, the Jabos, the Allied fighter bombers, own the day. German columns attempting to move toward the front are spotted and shredded. Tanks are left burning, trucks overturned, horses and men scattered in the ditches. It's a turkey shoot. Back at the newly carved-out airstrips in Normandy, an American crew chief, smeared with grease and running on pure caffeine, doesn't count the hours he's been awake. He counts sorties. He patches up a Thunderbolt, refuels it, rearms it, and sends it back up, sometimes within the hour. The pilot lands, grabs a quick report, and takes off again. The cycle is relentless, a continuous grinding down of the enemy. While the Jabos prowl over France, another, quieter campaign is underway, aimed at the very lifeblood of the German war machine: oil. Flying fortresses and liberators shift their focus to the refineries at Ploesti and the complex synthetic fuel plants that Germany depends on. One by one, they are smashed into twisted ruins. Smokestacks that once belched progress now pour black, oily smoke from uncontrollable fires. The effect is slow but certain. Training fields for new Luftwaffe pilots fall silent, their planes grounded by empty fuel tanks. Panzer divisions find their movements restricted, forced to ration every kilometer. The German war machine is slowly, quietly suffocating. The Luftwaffe is not yet broken. It can still lash out in sudden, ferocious bursts. New jet and rocket-powered fighters make their terrifying debut. In the Ardennes, a brief break in the weather allows them to wreak havoc on American ground troops. The suspense remains taut. This is a wounded beast, and a wounded beast is at its most dangerous. But every week, the American river of air power runs fuller, deeper, and faster. The losses are heavy, but they are sustainable. Germany's are not. The balance has irrevocably. By early 1945, the skies over Europe had changed. The once mighty Luftwaffe, the steel terror that had darkened Poland and France, was now a shadow. Its advanced jets and rocket planes sat idle on airfields, grounded not by Allied bombs, but by empty fuel tanks and a devastating lack of trained pilots. They were steel birds with clipped wings. Meanwhile, Allied bomber formations, vast and seemingly endless, roamed German skies almost at will. The contrast was stark, and nowhere was it clearer than in 2 very different rooms. In an American production office, an executive chalks another number on a board. It's a monthly total, pushing the year's output closer and closer to a figure once deemed impossible: 100,000 aircraft. The chalk clicks, another factory record broken. Thousands of miles away, in the opulence of Carenhall, Hermann Göring sits with his diminished circle. The mood is grim. They're not parsing victory reports, but casualty lists. They go over the numbers of downed planes and lost pilots' losses they know, with chilling certainty they can no longer replace. The laughter that once filled these halls is gone. Let's pull back from the high command and see this reality on the ground. Picture a young German flak gunner, barely a man, staring into the sky. He watches one wave of bombers pass, then another, then another. The sky never empties. He's learned a terrifying truth. For every plane he shoots down, 10 more seem to take its place. Now, jump to an Allied depot in England. The scale is almost geological. Stacks of spare propellers glint in the sun, creating forests of polished wood and metal. Mountains of tires sit waiting. Crates containing brand new Merlin engines are piled so high they look like a second landscape, a man-made mountain range of industrial power. And in the air, a young American pilot climbs into the cockpit of his brand new P-51 Mustang. He glances at the serial number, fresh paint still gleaming. The number is so high, so recent, that the metal this plane was made from was probably still raw ore just a few weeks ago. He is flying the physical manifestation of America's industrial will. This was the endgame. The strategy of replacement in action. Bridges were smashed, retreating columns were strafed, and cities were ringed by an inescapable aerial siege. The war from the air became a relentless, grinding process of annihilation, until finally, unconditional surrender collapsed the thunderous noise of battle into an eerie silence. And in that silence, we can finally grasp the full weight of a promise made years earlier. Remember when President Franklin D. Roosevelt called for the production of 50,000 planes a year? Critics, including Göring, laughed. It was absurd, impossible. Yet, within a few short years, America wasn't just meeting that goal. It was doubling it, producing nearly 100,000 aircraft in 1944 alone, and over 300,000 throughout the war. Of course, the story is nuanced. German armaments production surged impressively under Albert Speer. The courage and skill of pilots on all sides were undeniable. But the men fighting in the fields, the pilots in the